We're so glad you've joined us today. I'm Chelsea Gray, Executive Administrator for Potatoes USA, and I'll be kicking things off before handing the time over to Blair. If you haven't already, please save the date for the next World Potato Congress taking place June 23rd through 26th, 2024 in Adelaide, Australia. Please use the Q&A feature in Zoom to submit any questions you think of during the presentation. We will have time at the end for a question and answer session. World Potato Congress would like to recognize and thank their sustaining partners. And now I will hand the time over to Blair Richardson, CEO and President of Potatoes USA. Welcome, Blair.
Thank you, Chelsea, and welcome to Potatoes USA's virtual office today. We're very pleased to be here and have this opportunity to visit with you and talk to you about some of the things that we're doing in the United States and starting to launch around the world as well in terms of changing the conversation about potatoes. I do have to apologize. Kim Brashears, our Chief Marketing Officer, is not available to join me today. She normally gives the kind of the tactical part of this presentation and talks about the successes we've had in terms of changing consumer perception. But she is serving her civic duty and has been selected to be on a jury trial this week and is not able to be with us. And is one that is also unable to participate virtually as well as while they're secluded. Today, I'm going to start with a little bit of background on the U.S. potato market, what's going on here, and what we're doing with our products in the United States, just to kind of put it in context to show how we've been successful with the programs that we've implemented going back to about 2014, 15, 16 when we started this process. And we'll get into a little bit more of that today as well about the history and where we came from on this. So to begin with on the potato market overview, if I can get the presentation to go along with me. Okay, so first of all, I think we need to point out that potatoes are America's favorite vegetable, and this has not always been the case. Potatoes a couple of years ago were lagging behind some of the other commodities, but in recent years, we've been able to regain that position as America's favorite vegetable. And in some of the other studies that are out there, they're also trending as America's favorite takeout dish, which is always a surprise because it's such a difficult thing to get French fries to a home delivery in a satisfying manner. But as of the last couple of years, they've been the #1 takeout dish in the United States. Also, they're #1 side dish at restaurants and the #1 vegetable sold in the United States. Looking at where potatoes go in the United States, about food service and retail is about 50-50, and then about 20% of our total product goes export. So when you take that out, about 40% goes to food service, about 40% goes to retail in all forms. And at Potatoes USA, we do represent all forms of potatoes, dehy, frozen, fresh, chips, as well as imported potato products. This is a chart that we follow very closely because it really kind of justifies where we're focusing our attention. This tracks where U.S. food dollars are being spent, whether at home or at food service. And as you can see, as of about 2015, we shifted where the United States consumers were spending more money at food service than at home. And that looked like that was going to continue almost forever. And then all of a sudden, COVID hit and people started consuming food at home again as restaurants shut down. But it very quickly jumped back up. And we're now back to where we were just about before COVID, at 52% of US food dollars being spent at restaurants and 48% being spent at home. The reason this is important is because it really drives a lot of our focus. Even though we want to be able to influence consumers at home, where we have our biggest impact sometimes is actually at food service operations, whether that's a restaurant or an industrial food service operation. If we can influence the types of potato dishes and how people are using potatoes in those environments, that also has an indirect impact on what consumers think about potatoes and how they're using them at home as well. So we already talked about it, that we are America's favorite vegetable at food service. And I'm going to show you right now kind of some charts of how people are using potatoes and what types of potatoes at food service in the United States. The good thing about this is that we're almost back up to where we were pre-COVID, and we still have a little movement to go. You see from 2018 to 2022, But since 2022 data has come in, what we're seeing in 2023 is another step upward. So I think in 2023, we're going to be fully back to where we were pre-COVID. And by category, frozen is up almost the same as what it was pre-COVID. D-high is it's still down a little bit, but the biggest factor there is just we have not had enough product to satisfy demand. We're seeing that also in the frozen sector as well, where there's stronger demand than what we have supply to fulfill it with. On the fresh side, I know this is not similar in all countries around the world, where after COVID, fresh sales dropped down quite a bit. For us, we're still above the COVID levels, and we're continuing to track very well there. I think that this is largely reflective of just a new interest in the health and nutrition aspects of potatoes with consumers, and they're looking to use potatoes in a lot of new and innovative ways, which is certainly a very good positive for our industry. The chip sector, it's off a little bit, but again, I think that's more of a supply constraint than a demand constraint. On the retail side, we're also the #1 vegetable. Potatoes is way ahead of the other categories. Lettuce being #2, onions, tomatoes, peppers, and then all others being about 55 to 60% of what's going on in produce in the United States. But again, potatoes has a very strong position at retail as well as at food service. And looking at the similar charts at retail, total, we're still way ahead of where we were before COVID. We're not at the same levels we were during COVID, but that's just natural to expect. But frozen also is a category at retail that has gone up above and sustained itself above the pre-COVID levels. That was a great opportunity for both COVID and D-high processors to create new consumer demand. Customer acquisition was essentially a zero cost game for them during COVID. And a lot of those consumers learned that some of the frozen and dehydrated potato products that are available are very appealing, and they've stuck with those products after COVID has kind of passed through. We're seeing a lot more shelf space dedicated, especially in the frozen sector and retail groceries around the United States. On the fresh side, again, we've dropped down a little bit, but we're still up above where we were in 2019, which is kind of our measurement, the pre-COVID period. So I think that's just like on the food service side, we're doing very well on that. And then chips, they're very steady throughout this period. Looking at this next slide, we're going to talk a little bit more about what are consumers thinking about, what's important to them when they're choosing potatoes. And believe it or not, in the United States, most consumers do now believe that potatoes are generally a convenient, relatively easy item to cook. There's a lot of work that's gone into this at recipe development through our organization and other groups, but also in just the types of products that we're providing to consumers today. And when you're looking at potatoes, again, as we look at them, we're looking at them at all categories. So that includes D-high, which is a very convenient and quick way to prepare potatoes, but also in frozen, where they can put them in an air fryer now and have potatoes in about 8 minutes or less. It's also, consumers view potatoes as being a blank canvas, something they can do almost anything with. The carbs, the quality of carbs that are in potatoes, as new information, new research has come out through the Alliance for Potato Research and Education. Consumers are starting to understand that carbohydrates from potatoes are positive and not necessarily negative as they've been portrayed in the past. And then of course, potassium, energy, and everything else we've been working on, and just the general fuel for the body and the brain. These are messages that resonate with consumers in the United States. But these are all new messages that we've created, or mostly new messages that we've helped carry to consumers over the past 10 years. This has not always been like this. So when we ask consumers why they don't eat more potatoes, interestingly enough, the #1 response year after year is that they already think they eat enough potatoes. So it's not that they don't like potatoes, they don't enjoy potatoes, or they have a negative perception of potatoes. The #1 reason is that they're already eating in their mind enough for what they want. Then below that, you start looking at some of the negatives, which is that there are still a large number of consumers that believe they're high in carbs, they're fattening, they prefer other vegetables. And there's also misperception that color has a role in this, and that other vegetables are perhaps more nutritious. These are not as important as they were probably 10 years ago, but they are still out there, and there's something we're continuing to work on and to address. So that leads us up into how we're doing this. And the campaign that we created was called Potatoes, Real Food, Real Performance. The reason we chose this message is because we wanted to make sure that potatoes were front and foremost what we were talking about, but at the same time that we're talking about them in a way that was totally different than what we've ever discussed around potatoes in the past here in the United States, that they're a real food. They create a performance, they're a performance fuel, and not just something that you eat and think of a couch potato concept, which is prevalent in the United States even 10 to 15 years ago. So this was where we launched this, and we started working on this around 2014. And then we moved into more activities around 2016, 2017. But what we first looked at was, why do people love potatoes? We know people love potatoes, but we were, what is it about them? And so, when we asked those consumers back in 2013 or 2014 during that research phase, the responses they had was that they're eaten in a number of ways. They're filling, versatile, satisfying. They're a good source of carbohydrates, easy to use. These are all things that they were thinking at that time, rated in the order of preference. So these were all very positive things. But at the same time, there were a lot of barriers that we had to break through to actually get consumers to have confidence to eat potatoes and to enjoy potatoes without worrying about getting fat or things like that, because there's a lot of information out in the world, and especially in the media at the time. And this is just from maybe 10 years ago. Los Angeles Times talking about potatoes adding plenty to your waistline, making you fat again. Washington Post, those French fries could kill you. And then of course, Harvard, the T.H. Chan School of Nutrition, they have continually been promoting potatoes in a negative way for many years, and talking about the problem with potatoes and trying to get people to eat less potatoes. So I think that at that point in time, we saw all this negativity. We understood that we needed to approach it, but we needed to understand, have a good strategy and be very thoughtful about it. Because it wasn't just the media that was talking about this. Even today, there are organizations like the Culinary Institute of America who, and this is a chart that's very hard to kind of look through, but if you look in the upper right-hand corner, it says limit potatoes. It's the only item on their chart they're saying, in terms of vegetables or fruits, that they're saying reduce consumption of. So, we needed to work with all these organizations to kind of get them off these negative perceptions of potatoes. And that took a much different approach than just creating recipes and fun ideas about potatoes. We knew we could be successful because other categories have been successful in the United States: chocolate milk, eggs, nuts, avocados. These are all commodities that over time have either had negative perceptions or beliefs, nutritional beliefs that weren't really based on reality or good science. And we started imitating some of the successes they had and following some of the similar paths, because we knew they've been able to get back to a positive view, and we knew we wanted to. So the opportunity we saw was that we wanted to move from a permissive, passive approach to marketing that says essentially that it's okay, you can eat potatoes. And that's what we had been doing in the past. Even up to as recent as 2014, we were still running programs that were just really pretty passive, and it didn't start changing until around 2017. But we knew that if we were going to ever make a big difference in consumption of potatoes and how consumers perceive potatoes, we were going to have to get to a much more aggressive, proactive approach saying you should eat more potatoes. And that's a big change and shift in how you go about marketing. It doesn't mean that recipes and things like that aren't important, because you need to give people ideas and get creative with them. But at the same time, you can't just put them out there and hope people are going to eat more potatoes. You have to get more active in actually engaging with consumers, engaging with food service operators, so that they can engage and come back and buy more potatoes. So the approach we took is we went through about a years of research, and we looked at all the different conversations that were taking place in consumers on social media and basic media. What was important to them about their diets? What was important to them about food and their lives? And some of these things across the top line, I know it's hard to see, are things that they saw that were important. And then we looked down the brown column. We said, okay, what are all the attributes of potatoes that are important? Protein, acrylamide, and this is both negative and positive on both sides of this chart. And so then you start merging these together and say, okay, well, how do people perceive this? And if you look on here, you'll see yellow, green, and blue squares, and yellow, green, and red squares. And of course, red's negative, green's positive. And that's kind of how we got to the point that we ended up coming to, that athletic performance was where we wanted to be, or where we needed to be. Now, to understand that association, though, we had to do a lot of additional research once we kind of got through that part. And we had to understand how all of these things interacted. And so we were looking at things like healthy aging, child nutrition, diabetes, digestive health, bone health, of course, athletic performance. And what we found as we were going through all this and trying to say, okay, what can we get behind and really push our messaging around? It was athletic performance. And one of the reasons based on that is because it was just 100% positive when you look at potatoes and you think about performance as a performance fuel. And this athletic performance also has a lot to do in relation to other things like weight management, bone health, digestive health, healthy aging. All of these things require some type of physical activity, whether it's a professional athlete or just your daily person getting, exercising to stay in some kind of a health for whatever reason. So these were all important things that all were supported by athletic performance. So the result was that potatoes were often overlooked regarding performance nutrition. We went out, this was not something people were talking about at the time. We did a lot of research on what was being talked about in media, in social media, especially on the internet. And this was not a discussion topic at all. Potatoes and performance and nutrition, it was zero, essentially. It just wasn't discussed. And this is going back 2015, 2016. So we knew that if we were going to make a change and we were going to be successful, we were going to have to elevate that. So the opportunity we came up with, again, was that we should be eating more potatoes. Consumers should view potatoes as something they should add more of to their diet. To do that, we needed to create a moment of reevaluation. So our initial marketing campaigns were an effort to try to get consumers to stop and think about potatoes again, perhaps in a different way. So they weren't, again, thinking about potatoes as something that makes you fat or makes you tired or is something that you're going to eat while you're sitting on the couch. It's going to be a part of your fueling strategy to have a successful day. And whether that's running a race or riding a bike or teaching a class of 30 kids about English or whatever other subject, or coming to the office and working here at an organization like Potatoes USA, we all have to fuel our days. So to create a moment of reevaluation, we implemented a number of strategies. And we started off with the image of athletes. We did not go out and spend millions of dollars on hiring spokespeople from professional athletic associations. I mean, to get messy to promote potatoes, 2 or 3 tweets would probably blow our budget. We knew that wasn't possible, but we also knew that wasn't necessary because it's what people are perceiving is what's important. It's not always exactly who carries the message, but we wanted, people who were definitely in good athletic condition to be carrying that message, to be put in our promotional videos and in our campaigns, and then also to be working with them on their social media networks to talk about potatoes in a more performance manner. So this is a couple of videos that we have that I'd like to share with you that kind of chart the track of this. This first video is one of our very earliest videos, and it was talking about in a very simple way that potatoes make you better. It doesn't change, it's not like it's gonna totally change the world. It's just gonna make you better.
Potatoes, real food, real performance. What are you eating?
So this was one video in a series that was just really quick, and we put it out on social media, and they were very well received. And again, it was just a simple idea that if you eat potatoes, it's going to help you fuel your day and fuel whatever you're doing. And it's a question, that moment of reflection was being forced on you, saying, what are you eating? And if you're going to eat something that's going to help you perform at a higher level. And then we went into, we kind of adjusted a little bit. We kept looking at where we were. We went from high performance athletes, again, not professionals, but high performance in 2018. In 2020, we went into adults, focusing on adults 25 to 54. And then in 2022, this last year, we started looking at young millennials, Generation Z. And then now this year, we've narrowed it even further to Generation Z only. Now, Generation Z doesn't mean you're only 18 to 24. That's the technical range in the United States that we use for that generation. There are a lot of people that identify with Generation Z, even if they're in Generation X or even in the baby boomer generation. So it's more of an idea of how you're approaching with your marketing and your performance. So, and that started leading us in 2022 and to some campaigns that were just a little bit different. This is a campaign that was designed for an iPhone. And I apologize, the video and sound's not exactly right tied up here, but we had some problems with the formatting on this. So again, this is a very simplistic approach. It's just talking about eating potatoes and performing at a higher level. And again, we're still using athletics here in terms of our performance background. But in this case, it was a bit younger generation that we were focusing on. And it was, again, you're trying to create that moment of reflection. What are you eating? And why would you want to eat potatoes? And if you want to get more information, you can click through and you can go into our targeted websites to find all the nutrition information that you would need. And this generation is very interested in learning more about what they're reading, what they're seeing on their phones. This last video is kind of where we are today. And this video is now we're evolving from pure athletic performance, and we're starting to expand on that message that I was talking about earlier. It's not just about athletic performance, but it's about your mental performance, how your mind and soul are being impacted by your food. And so this is a short video here of a father and a daughter that, again, they're at home. And it gives you images of influencing that total body need for something like potatoes. So again, it's very simple. It's a father and daughter sitting there. The daughter's doing her homework, and they're eating potatoes. And then afterwards, the father goes to his home gym and he's working out. Not a professional athlete, but it's important to him that he has a good health regimen, and potatoes are part of that healthy regimen. So this is the message we're trying to create. This is where we're focusing this year, the type of messaging that we're using this year. But again, the theme is all similar throughout the past 5 years, 6 years now. We haven't strayed from that strategy. It's just that we're adjusting who we're talking to and how we're approaching this. And as this promotional campaign evolves and ages, we're expanding some of the reach of it and some of the influence. So that's kind of where we've been with it. We are definitely breaking through the doors and barriers that we first identified, and we've had a lot of success with this campaign. And we can measure that in a lot of ways. Obviously, the one we talked about earlier is potatoes are America's favorite vegetable. This gives you about a 12-year trend line of where we've been on that chart. You can see back in 2011, 2012, that potatoes were number 3 behind broccoli and corn here in the United States. In 2018, 2017, we were able to get above broccoli just slightly, but we've been expanding that gap in that lead over the last 6 years. So we're very excited by this. This certainly shows that there's been an effective change in consumer attitudes and perceptions of potatoes in the United States. And it's a great measurement of whether you're successful with whatever you're doing, whether it's a performance campaign or anything else. So we're always excited to see this every year. But more importantly are the consumer beliefs and their perceptions of potatoes. This comes from our 2023 brand new consumer attitudes and usage study. We've been doing this study for many years. It's a very broad study. We contract for it, so we don't actually influence it. But we wanted to look this year at what was going on in 2018 when we really started the campaign versus 2023 in terms of consumer perceptions and how they believe, what they believe about potatoes. So these are all very important things, provide nutrients, help me fuel my everyday activities, sustained energy, good for weight management, used and improved by athletes. Across the board, all of these things are up this year versus 2018. This is exactly the type of success we would want to see in terms of metrics of measurement if we're going to be successful in a campaign. There are a couple of others here that I'd also like to look at. This is a little more focused about how we're changing some other beliefs. Energy-packed vegetable. This was not something that was talked about that much, but is starting more and more. Provides under-consumed vitamins and minerals, good for recovery, contains protein. I mean, certainly the protein conversation is really new around potatoes. And the research that we're seeing from the Alliance for Potato Research and Education is continuing to support even more valuable information about the protein content of potatoes and the quality of that protein being equal to or greater than whey and egg protein. So, these are really big, important things that we're going to continue to insert into our messaging in the future and allow us to kind of keep growing with that. So the results of this are obvious in the media as well. In fact, almost every day or every couple of days, I get a summary of all the potato stories in the United States and many in Europe as well that talk about potatoes. And if I go back to what we would see 5 years ago, even the majority of those conversations were negative in traditional media. Today, I got a report, all of them were positive, 100%. And that's not the first day that's happened. We're seeing more and more of that, where the media conversations are changing about potatoes. And so these are just a couple of examples of organizations that in the past have actually talked about potatoes in a negative way, that today they're talking about potatoes in a much more positive way. So, these are the types of things we wanted to see when we launched this program, and the things that are important, that if we're going to convince consumers to eat more potatoes, they need to have this basis, fundamental information that's positive. We're finally starting to achieve that. And again, I've mentioned APRI a couple of times. APRI, the Alliance for Potato Research and Education, is such an important part of what we're doing in terms of marketing and promoting potatoes. Without the research on nutrition and health that APRI is doing, we would not be able to go out and convince writers and editors to change stories when they do write something negative about potatoes. And we've only been doing that for about 2.5 years now, because we finally had enough research and data to back up our claims that what they were writing was wrong. Over the past 2 years, we have contacted every single writer that had something that was biased or misinformed about potatoes in the United States. If we thought it was negative to potatoes, we would reach out to them and we would talk to them and explain the research, explain the facts, and ask them to retract their story and correct it. As of last month, we were at about a 39% success rate in getting writers and editors to actually pull stories off the internet and put them back up corrected. So it's been a great program, but again, we could not do this without all the research and information that the Alliance for Potato Research and Education has been putting together over the past decade. This is such an important organization for the globe. Nutrition searches are also increasing as we've been pushing this performance and nutrition message. We're getting more and more people interested about what's going on with nutrition. As you can see here, just on our website alone, over 2 million searches about nutrition only through potatogoodness.com. That has nothing about recipes or anything else, which recipes are certainly still the biggest search item, but nutrition-related searches, over 2 million just on our website. Influencers are praising potatoes. We got a lot of great nutrition and athletic influencers out there. They're talking about potatoes. We got 60 different nutrition and food influencers that are talking about them on a daily basis, not just in the United States. This is around the world where we're engaging with influencers to make sure that they're carrying that message to the many, many people that they're talking to on a daily basis. And that's such an important thing that we're doing. We're also featuring potatoes at events like marathons and other types of activities, Ironman races. We were the official performance vegetable for the Rock and Roll Marathon. We were the first vegetable ever to be listed as an official vegetable for a marathon. So this was really an important shift too, to get people that are really serious about nutrition to think about potatoes as a go-to item in their diets. The potato industry is also a very important part of this. There have been over 30 industry events in the last couple of years that are taking everything that we've been building and creating and then implementing it at their local level. And I can't reinforce the importance of this, because we can do whatever we're doing at the official Potatoes USA level, and we do a lot. But if we don't have the support of the industry and the industry members who are engaging with their own consumers, their own communities, carrying that same message and re-emphasizing what we're talking about, then we're just losing a huge opportunity. So we have been very active in actually reaching out to our industry groups and organizations, state organizations, farming companies, sales and marketing companies that are actually selling potatoes, to carry the message and use everything that we've created We don't retain it and hold on to it and protect it as something that's private. We want other people to use the same messaging, the same ideas, our photography and art that we're creating and paying for, and we don't charge for that. We want them to use it voluntarily, and it's been very successful for us to expand that message. We also, about 3 years ago, we pushed this program into our international markets. We now have had over 20 international events, and we're carrying the same message in the 26, 27 markets that we promote potatoes in around the world as well. So we've really kind of taken that next step forward. Now, in our Spud Lab, our test kitchen that we have here in our offices, we are doing a lot of work with recipes, and that is a very important part of what we're doing. We've had over 75 new nutritious recipes introduced over the past 2 years, and these are all recipes that would qualify for any kind of a health and nutrition program, and they've been very successful. Now, we've created hundreds and hundreds of other recipes that are focused more on the excitement about potatoes, or the variability of potatoes, or the flexibility of potatoes, or the different culinary cultures that potatoes are coming from. Because that's generally what the majority of consumers are looking for. They're not always looking for nutritious recipes, but when they are, we have a very broad and deep set of recipes for them that they can come and find. And again, we would encourage anyone to utilize these recipes, utilize the artwork that we create for these recipes in your own programs and activities. We want to carry that out, and we don't feel like we're competing with other organizations around the world. We feel like we're all a partner in this and trying to carry a similar message. So we've also launched Team Potato. This is it's about over 4,200 members. I would encourage you to sign up for this. If you'll get your phone ready, I'll put a QR code up in just a moment that allows you to just take a picture of the QR code and go directly to the sign up page. But this is a group of semi-casual to semi-active athletes, I am also on Team Potato, as are many people in our office. Just people who love potatoes and want to share what they're doing with potatoes when they're working out, when they're running, when they're biking, or whatever it is. And it's a really great dynamic group that's a lot of fun to be a part of. And I would encourage you again to get engaged. They do a lot of virtual events and activities like virtual marathons or virtual 5Ks, where it doesn't matter where you live, you can still compete and upload your success stories for it. So this is the QR code. I'll leave it there for just a second as we wrap this up. I hope this has been a great opportunity for everyone to learn a little more about where we've come from, why we made the decisions we made, the research that went behind those decisions, and then the programs and activities that we're implementing today, and how those are evolving on an annual basis as we continue to expand and reach more people with this message. When you talk about potatoes and performance today, it is not something that is unheard of anymore. As I mentioned earlier in my conversation, a few years ago, or 7 or 8 years ago, when you looked at what people were talking about online, potatoes and performance, that did not show up together. When you do those same searches today, they're in the top 3 of conversations of what's happening and what people are talking about in potatoes today. So we know we've been very successful. We are in a situation right now that we're very excited about where we're going to go with this, and how we're going to continue to expand and grow these programs. We would look forward to working with you. If you have any questions, if you have any thoughts or ideas, if you'd like to utilize any of our promotional materials, our marketing activities, anything that we've already done, we're happy to share that with you and help you start going down the road of success about potatoes and real food and real performance. So Chelsea, do we have any questions?
We do, yes. So someone said, amazing work. How are you governed and funded?
Great question. So we are a organization that we're an instrumentality of the U.S. government. So we were created in 1971 on January 13th by U.S. Congress Act. And then in 1972, we started actually activities. The funding comes almost entirely from grower assessments. So for every 100 pounds of potatoes, fresh weight potatoes, whether it's chipped, dehy, frozen, or fresh, or imported, we receive 3 cents. And that total budget comes up to around $15 million a year. And then in addition to that, for our international programs, we apply for market access programs and other grants from the federal government to promote potatoes from the United States into markets around the world that we're engaged with.
Great. Okay. And Peter asked, how could your work with Potatoes USA be adopted by other countries?
Well, that's a great question, Peter. So if you're engaged in marketing, promotion, communications, and you want a quick kind of catch up quickly, you can take everything that we've created, these videos, these commercials, you can convert them to whatever language your region would respond to, and put your own logos and whatever else on there, change them however you'd want, but use everything that we've already created and paid for. There are a few things that we had time limits on that we are not able to share, but the vast majority of the information, the recipes that we create on a weekly basis, and everything else are available. If you want to come into our offices here and work with our chefs with any particular items or activities or photography, we can help set that up as well. We have a full culinary education center here that allows for meetings of groups of up to 70 people. It's all 100% virtually engaged, so there are cameras all over these offices that allow people to expand their reach. Even if there's only 10 people here working on something together, they can actually broadcast that out to around the world. So whatever we can do to help, we're happy to help. We're not trying to own this and keep it from other people. We want people to be able to carry a similar message and adapt it to whatever works for your market. Maybe potatoes, real food, real performance is not the exact wording, but the concept is there. The idea of potatoes providing the fuel that you need, the energy you need to succeed at your day is something that's universal.
Perfect. And Tina asked, where can international organizations access the APRI nutritional information?
So there, you can Google APRI or the Alliance for Potato Research and Education. There is a website. I think it's apri.org, but I can't remember.
Yes, apri.org.
Apri.org, apre.org. All the information, again, it's shared, it's published. And we don't only conduct research here in the United States. A lot of the research is coming from Europe, is coming from Australia, New Zealand, other countries around the world that we're reaching out to researchers, and we're spending about $1 million a year or so on actual research. And a lot of it today is no longer epidemiological research. We've kind of elevated it to clinical research because we think that's a much higher level of information that we're able to share. And it's been so successful. And if you're interested in getting involved with APRI, I would encourage you to talk with us or with the APRI organization to get involved. The board is open if people want to get involved at one level or another. And I'd be happy to talk to you more individually about that offline.
Perfect. This question says, do you support potato programs of developing countries also?
Well, we do. I mean, we support all programs. We can't fund programs that are not coming from our offices, but we can provide the information and the resources that we've already created for you to use.
Great. I think that was it.
Okay. Well, Ellen, or if there aren't any other questions, I certainly have time for a few more questions if there are any, but if not, we could probably wrap it up early today too.
Okay. I think that was it. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. A recorded version of this webinar will be available at the World Potato Congress website, potatocongress.org. And thank you again for joining us.